Hey, welcome back to Rust Order Garage. 61 Rambler Rockbox wagon. Took a week off from making videos because I got too much to do. The weather, as I've said already, is starting to get colder. This is the time to get things put away and everything prepared before it does snow. But I did go to Stafford Springs, Connecticut swap meet last Sunday. It was excellent. The weather was beautiful. The place was packed. I bought a whole bunch of stuff I didn't plan on buying, including a whole bunch of stuff for my 66 Chevelle SS 396. Bet you didn't know I had one of those. Yep. And somebody had beautiful bumpers, rad support, grill, headlight extensions. I bought a whole bunch of stuff I really didn't even need. I bought a steering column. He had all this 66 stuff, which you don't see so often, in really nice shape for not too bad a price. Paid a fair amount for it, but it was worth it. And I needed that front bumper, which was beautiful. And both the bumpers have bumper guards, which is not easy to find for the 66. So I got a really nice bumper that my car needed. I don't know if I really needed the grill and stuff, but I know I needed the bumper. So started getting that stuff. I'm like, let's get working on the 66 Chevelle. Let's get that out and do it. So I don't know what's going to be next after the Rambler. Probably something you wouldn't expect, but we'll see. Anyway, now that all that is done, and I'm still busy, but I'm going to take a day and we're going to build the drive shaft today for the Rambler. So lots of ways to make a drive shaft. I'm sure there's plenty of videos out there. I'm going to show you how I do it because I do it with no special tools, no dial indicators, no big lathe, and it works great as long as you can weld. If you are comfortable with your welding and not worried about it blowing apart or being junk, I wouldn't use a flux core welder for something like this. But if you can weld or even get a tack weld to bring it to somebody else, this will work for you to get yourself a drive shaft, and they work great. And as far as balancing and stuff, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how I do it, and I'm going to show you how I do it, of course. So let's get going. But we have to talk about two things first. First off, what we're going to be doing here is shortening an existing drive shaft. I'm not going to make one from scratch, although we could from pieces of a drive shaft. But we're going to shorten one. It's the easiest way to work. Get one that's too long for your application, cut it down. One important thing to talk about, though, is critical speed. What drive shaft should you use? I mean, you're going to find them at swap meets or junkyard or whatever. And what critical speed is the RPM where your drive shaft turns into a wet noodle and wants to start whipping all over the place and will twist itself to oblivion and fail. I'm not talking strictly from horsepower. I'm just talking from RPMs. It'll just start whipping and it'll be done. That's why you will see different size drive shafts on different vehicles. In most cases, streetcar. The drive shaft that you find, it's a factory drive shaft, it's going to be fine. That diameter that drive shaft is safe for the length of the drive shaft, and we're going to make it shorter so you don't have to worry so much. But what happens is if you start getting into racing or real high RPM situations where you could get into that critical speed area, and that critical speed is calculated based on the material the drive shaft's made of, the diameter of the drive shaft. You start getting into that danger zone, you need to change things. An example is most street cars that you see from the 60s, 70s will have a drive shaft that's maybe 3 inches, 3¼ I don't even think I've had anything 3½, and they're all made of steel. You look at all these Silverado pickups that I buy as donors, most of them have aluminum drive shafts that are 4 to 5 inches in diameter. Why is that? Well, that's because of critical speed. Those drive shafts are very long, which means you need to go to a larger diameter and a lighter weight material to keep out of that critical speed area. I will post up a chart that will list common materials that drive shafts are made of, diameters, and give you an idea what the critical speed is. You just have to remember, your drive shaft is spinning faster than your engine if you're using overdrive. So do your calculations in third gear or the 1-to-1 gear, fourth gear if you got a 4-speed, and that'll give you an idea just how fast your drive shaft is spinning based on tire size, engine RPM, and vehicle speed. And of course, the second thing for making a drive shaft is getting the measurement right. How many times do I see videos where people make a measurement, they order a drive shaft, they get it back, it's too long, right? So I guess it just depends on how you make your measurement. Well, in our case, we're doing our own work, so it doesn't matter. If it's a little too long, we just cut a little bit more off of it and do it. But I'll show you how I do the measurement anyway to get started, and as far as where to cut on the drive shaft to avoid have to worrying about balancing. All right, so first thing I need to do is I got to measure for my drive shaft. Duh, right? Well, the thing is, depending on your rear suspension, that could affect your measurement for your length. If you have a leaf spring type suspension, and really for any car, ideally, when you take this measurement, you should have the car on the ground at ride height. Car is compressed on suspension as it's going to be driving down the road. The reason that is at that point is where I want my yoke in the transmission sticking out of the transmission about an inch, inch and a quarter. Most of the time, if you're shortening a factory drive shaft, there's going to be a witness mark on it where the original seal was running. So you can see the rusty area of the shaft is the only amount that was sticking out. Everything else is inside the transmission. And the reason that is that the yoke rides in a bushing that's in the back of the transmission. If you have the yoke too far out, you're going to put a lot of stress on that bushing. I've seen people where they need a longer drive shaft and they just go buy a longer yoke and end up pushing this U-joint way out of the transmission. That's not the smart way to do it, because you're just adding weight on the end of a lever that's whipping. So you're just putting more stress on the tail shaft bushing, and eventually it's just going to wear out. So if you need a longer drive shaft, get one made or cut down another one, but don't use a longer yoke, in my opinion, to make it work. And again, why is that? Because I follow what the factory did, and it works. So I'm going to set my yoke sticking out that much out of there with the witness mark, so I know how far it goes out. And as far as suspension, like I said, it's best to have it on the ground at ride height where it's going to be with the suspension compressed, and there's a reason for that. While it might not matter so much on this car because it's a 4-link, if you have a leaf spring suspension, the rear axle is going to move front to back as the leaf springs compress. So if you take a measurement with the car in the air and the springs hanging, your length may not be correct. Even with this 4-link here, the axle's not going to move much front to back. It'll move a little, but not much. But what I've done is I've taken the rear springs out of the car, and I have a jack under the rear axle, and I've raised it up to what looks around where the wheels will be in the wheelhouse at ride height. So now everything here, theoretically, is the same as if I had it on the ground, and I can get my measurement. And then how you measure, that's up to you, as long as you copy it to whatever drive shaft you're going to work with. So in my case, what I'm going to do and what I do is I just measure from the back of the cup where the U-joint's going to be in here to the same spot on the rear axle to the back of the cup, which will be around here. And then I'll add like a 1/4 inch, because the drive shaft, you know, the metal goes about a 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch pass on each side. So I'll make it like a 1/4 inch longer. So based on my measurements here, I was 49. Where's my tape measure? I think I was 49 3/4, measuring from the back of this cup area to the back of that cup area. No, it was about, what's that? 51. Let me get this thing like this. Let's see where we're at here. My measurements. That is about 51 inches from the back of this cup to the back of where the cup would be in the front yoke. And then I'm going to add a 1/4 inch. So like 51 1/4 inches overall is what I'm looking for. All right, so here's the drive shaft I'm going to shorten. This is actually a G-body drive shaft. It's only about 2 3/4 in diameter. but it will work just fine. We're actually going to shorten it. Let's see how many inches. This is, let's see, I got to get my tape on here, and I'll be measuring from the ends. I like to measure this way. And we were going to go 51 1/4, and this is about 53 3/4. So we're going to shorten this down. What's that? 51 1/4, 2 1/4, 3 1/4, about 2.5 inches. And the reason I want to know that, first off, is you see it has the factory weights on it, including one on the back. I don't want to remove these. I want to leave them there. That's been my secret so far to not having to balance anything. They've been fine. So if I'm going to be taking 2.5, even 3 inches off of this, it's not a problem if I make it too long to start, because we have room where we could get up to that weight and still be able to shorten the tube. So first thing I'm going to do is we're going to mark this drive shaft. You remember about keeping U-joints in phase? We talked about it when we did the steering. Well, I'm going to put a line right down this tube from the center of this joint to the center of that joint, or at least enough up that I can get it straight. So when I cut the tube off and cut this section out, I put it back exactly where it was, and the joints stay in phase. It also works to just put it on the floor, keep this stuff flat on both ends, and it'll work, but don't forget to do it. All right, so I just made a short line here with my destroyed paint marker. You can tell this is a real high-tech video here. And we're working on the floor because I'm not going to get a table out and be bougie. So we're going to do it right here. So anyway, we're going to get that marked like that so we know how this is going to go back together. Now, the thing is, I'm going to take my high-tech cutoff wheel here, and I'm going to cut through the weld all the way around the drive shaft. I don't want to just slam through it because I don't want to cut into the yoke. The yoke actually goes into the drive shaft tube. I just want to cut enough to get the tube separated from the yoke. All right, this one's making me a little nervous. I don't want to cut too much into it and get into the yoke. So what I'm going to do is, because it doesn't seem like it wants to let go right away, I'm going to cut this about 1 inch out and cut straight through the drive shaft. And then I'll come back and peel away this section here that I started trimming away to. All right, so now I'm just going to come back the cutoff wheel. I'm going to make some cuts in this piece of drive shaft that's still on the yoke, and we'll get that peeled off. I'm just trying to go slow so I don't get into the actual yoke itself. I have a feeling the weld may be just a little wide, and I'll have to just cut it wider. All right, I got my yoke cleaned up. I got the excess drive shaft tube that was on it welded, or ground off rather, and I did get some cuts in the yoke, but it's okay. We're going to weld that right up. As long as those cuts are toward the inside edge there, they're going to get burned in with the weld, so that's fine. So that's cleaned up. Now what I'm going to do is just kind of set this next to the drive shaft, and I made my mark. I want to get this overall length about where I want it to be, and then I know where to cut my drive shaft. So that right there looks about 51 1/4. So I marked it. Let's cut it. All right, to get my cut, I'm just going to use a hose clamp to get a sort of straight line to cut on. I don't care if it's perfect. You'll see why once we get further into it. That'll do just fine. Cut that off with the cutoff wheel and move forward. All right, got the drive shaft cut down. What I'm going to do now is use a carbide bit. Just clean out the inside of the tube. All right, with the tube cleaned out, now I have to reassemble this. Sometimes these just fit in. Most of the time, they don't. In fact, I've had them where I've had to heat up the tube and knock this in with a hammer to get it back in. So I'm going to get it in there and see how bad it's going to be. This one feels snug, but a hammer might get it in there. So I'm going to set this on some wood and knock that in. And I want to get it as close as I can, at least getting the joints back in phase. I can move it a little bit once I get it in, but it's a tight fit. So I'm going to try to line up my line on the tube with my line on the yoke best I can. All right, I knocked the end yoke in, had to use a hammer. Got our lines lined up so our joints are in phase. We've got the correct amount of area sticking out of the drive shaft there, or sticking out of the yoke. About an inch, a little more than an inch. So that's good. And that also, with that correct length, you have enough length that you can get the drive shaft out of the car, which is important. So that's perfect. But, do this all with one hand. Now you say, well, how in the world do you know if that drive shaft is straight? Well, we're going to make it straight. All right, so we're going to move on to the next step. But one thing I just want to make sure you notice, when I put the yoke back in, I left a gap, about 1/8 of an inch. That way you can really get the weld burned in there. You don't want it jammed up right against it. And I ground down on the existing weld that was on the yoke and kind of tapered it, so you have a good place to burn that weld in. All right, now let's make this thing straight. All right, so here we go. This is what we're going to do. I need a reference to make sure this drive shaft is straight. Scrap piece of brake tubing. I'm going to clamp it to the rear axle with a vice grip. What else would you expect? Get that on there so you can see it. And I'm going to adjust this brake line so it is very close to the drive shaft, not touching it, but you want it just off of it and as close to the rear of the tube as possible. And you can just start off with something like that. I don't know if I can get you in there to see my gap there. I think I'll get something to put the camera on. You can see my gap like that. All right. And then what I'm going to do is turn the drive shaft and watch the gap. And the gap is not going to be even all the way around because the drive shaft's not straight. We're going to fix it. So let me get you set in a spot where I can make this so you can see what I see. All right, so that might give you a little bit of a better view. What I'm looking at is the gap between this tube and the drive shaft. And as I rotate, I get a bigger gap. And all I'm going to do is tap this yoke until I get even gap all the way around. Now this one, a little tight. This yoke was tight going in the tube, so it's not going to be as easy to move. But I am going to tap this until I get an even gap all the way around as this turns. And then what I can do is I can adjust this tube even closer or so that it just touches and spin it around and make sure it's not pushing or moving it around. It's better not to have it touch the drive shaft because you can get a false positive will say that you think it's perfect. Better to have a gap, and you can even use a shim or something if you want to measure it if you don't trust your eyes. But I've been doing it like this for years, and they run smooth as silk. I know they say they're supposed to be straight within so many thousandths of an inch, but guess what? This works. All right, we are looking good. My gap looks consistent. Joints are in phase. All that's left to do is weld her up. All right, next I'm going to put a couple tacks on this thing, one at a time, and just verify it again by spinning, make sure everything's all the same. I'll use the 110 machine to put the tacks on, but then I'm going to take this out of the car and use the 220 machine to really burn it in there, because it's kind of important to have a good burned in weld on this. So you get a tack on it, spin it around, second tack, spin it around, make sure everything's still good, and we'll get it out. All right, take it out and weld it up. All right, we are all welded up. Gap looks good. And there we go. Low buck drive shaft. Actually didn't cost anything. Even the U-joints were free because they're good. They came with the Malibu that donated this and also donated the floor. So yeah, we got a drive shaft. All right, so there you go. Low buck drive shaft. Nothing to it, right? It's not rocket science. You can do it. Trust me, it'll work just fine. So I did some more work here. You can see while I was in between other things, but we'll go over that on the next video when we get to that. So I got to get back outside. It's starting to get late already, but I need to continue cleaning up before it gets cold. So that's it for today on the Rambler. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Really appreciate it. And thank you for following this crazy project. See you on the next video. Later.